Hey everybody, welcome back to the Pomerium live stream. My name's Nick Taylor and I'm your host. And today I'm hanging out with my friend Marino Wijay. How are you doing today, Marino?
I'm doing well, Nick. Thank you so much for having me on the show today. I've seen you do these several times, and I also see the TikToks and random reels that you pop out there. So it's always fun to see like the conversations that you end up having. So glad to be here.
Yeah, no, thanks for joining. I know you got a lot on the go, but I really do appreciate it. And you know, I think we've known each other for 2 years, maybe three, but
Yeah, roughly around there. Yeah.
yeah, met in the community as a lot of these things happen, which is super cool. I guess for folks, I know a lot of folks in the cloud space probably know who you are, but for folks who might not know who you are, maybe like a little TLDR, and like people are always curious how people got into tech as well. If you wanted to maybe touch on that, so
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Canadian as well, alongside Nick, and I'm just here based close to Toronto. Um, Definitely one of the biggest advocates of some of the stuff we do in community as well. And yeah, the Maple Mafia. I totally
yeah,
agree with you. Um, but I currently work at a company called Isovalent, which is part of Cisco, and I'm a solutions engineer. So I work directly with end users to help them understand, how to take on like networking, but more for like the cloud native and virtualization, and even cloud space as well, and even AI to a degree. Um,
okay, yeah,
and how I got into tech is actually interesting. So I'll keep it short, but a long time ago, like probably about 3 decades ago, my mom brought home a computer, and it was like the first computer we ever had, right? And I was like curious, like, what is this big, like, chunky monitor with this box that was making this humming noise, and it was doing some cool stuff. And she took it on because she was starting to learn programming development. So she was like a really early developer, learning C and a lot of the database stuff back then. And I was
yeah,
curious. I just jumped on and started like hacking away, and I just had this inclination to really dive deeper into how a computer works and what it was made up of. Mostly gaming on that little box, if you will. I think it was from IBM way back in the day.
yeah,
But
yeah.
that set me on the path of being in tech, where I started to work in different organizations and do a lot of different things, from like the hardware level all the way up to what I did today. And it's much like a lot of other tech stories where someone brings some sort of fancy tech device home, and you get to tinker around with it, and before you know it, you're now well into your career. So that's the TLDR version. There's a lot more, but if
Yeah, yeah.
anyone's interested, we could definitely get into it at another point.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. It's like kind of not exactly the same path. Like my dad's an accountant, but he our first computer was like a VIC 20, and so like QBasic, and just like a fun thing as a kid was just looping printing your name across the screen, or at least I thought it was cool at the time,
Yeah.
but the funny thing is, because he's an accountant, like he eventually we got like an IBM clone. It was like I think 4 megahertz, like maybe like I don't know what, like 4 megs of RAM, or
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was, but he had Lotus 123, so that's like
Yeah.
precursor to like Microsoft Office for newer folk, but it wasn't games or anything, but like I just had fun making pie charts. I had no idea what I was doing. It was like a monochrome screen, but that's like it was just something fun to do. And then we eventually, got like some clone games like Pac-Man and stuff. But eventually I got into web later on, like a lot of people, like GeoCities and stuff. And that's kind of, I was never like, die hard into computers, but the web I think was the gateway, no pun intended, to get into tech for me. So, but yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
cool though. Yeah.
Very
So sorry, go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say, very much remember the dial-up days and the
Yeah.
tones you would hear, and it's like, oh, this thing is interesting. I can access the rest of the world through this one little gateway, if you will.
Yeah, no, totally.
Really cool stuff.
Yeah, I think the funniest thing I can remember about programming was when I didn't know how to program, and like on a Windows machine, there was like WinSock DLL and like just for your to connect to the internet and stuff. And I remember loading something up and some DLL was missing. And so like I'm like, oh, okay, this before I know anything about programming really, I just copied some file and renamed it to the missing file, thinking it and of course it didn't. But anyways, you learn later on, but that just makes me laugh a bit. Hey, Mohammed, good to see you, man. Yeah, so like you've been saying, these days, you've been a lot. You're a CNCF ambassador. You've been deep in Kubernetes and stuff, and I kind of started on a bit of a Kubernetes journey last year when I joined Pomerium, and I've been finding it super cool. It's been uh, even though I came really from more like an application developer background, going into infra and security, I've been finding it just really fun, and there's just gnarly stuff. And like we've talked about this offline before, but like for Kubernetes, at least, there's so much of it is networking, and like people, I don't know, not that they forget that networking exists. I think, like, I'm thinking more of like app devs. It's just like, hey, I built my site and I just pushed it to Netlify or I put it up on AWS, but not thinking about all that stuff that's really going on under the hood. And I know you've dug a lot into that, and I don't know. I guess curious how you got into maybe Kubernetes and even the CNCF, like in terms of like community and all that.
Yeah, I mean, the Kubernetes bit was interesting. So way back in like 2018 was when I first really started to see Kubernetes out in the field.
Okay.
And at that time, like I had no idea what it was. It just was another foreign box to me, and I had no idea how it worked or how it functioned. But it was doing things with containers. So a lot of folks might be using Docker today or similar tools to build their apps and package them. But when you had to operate it at scale, that's where Kubernetes came in. And I didn't really understand that, but I understood virtualization really well. So if any of you ever use like VirtualBox and stood up a Linux VM or something, kind of the same concept. And today you would probably use like a cloud provider and spin up an EC2 instance or something to get you going. But
Yeah.
I actually got caught red-handed not knowing how it was supposed to work when I was trying to do some networking things with it at one point.
Okay.
And it was really bad because I was at this end user site in Ottawa, actually, and we were working through some of this like networking stuff and Kubernetes stuff. And I knew the networking side, I just didn't understand how Kubernetes was actually interacting with it. And so like I
Yeah.
was thinking it might work like this, and then the customer called me out and was like, "No, that's not how it works. It works this way, and this is how we understood it." And I was like, "All right, I need help." So I called a friend and got on the phone and we sorted through it all. But from that moment on, I realized like I had to double down and really understand what this Kubernetes thing was at that time. So I
Hmm.
was doing a lot of research, asking a lot of people, and I noticed in the company I was working for, VMware at the time, actually had a Kubernetes practice. So they were building environments that allowed people to both learn Kubernetes and so that they could also go out and in turn sell it to their customers. And that was the opportunity I saw where, okay, let me dig in a little bit deeper and find out what was going on. The other side
Yeah.
to that too was I was a certification junkie way back then.
Yeah.
And the best way I learned was through certification. So at the time, there were two, the CKA and the CK8, Certified Kubernetes Administrator and Application Developer. And they basically tested your ability to work with like the Kubernetes ecosystem, essentially. So I went through
Hmm.
courses and did some study groups internal to VMware, and just got to a point where I understood it to be very similar to what VMware was doing and what
Yeah.
vSphere was doing at the time. So if folks aren't familiar with vSphere and VMware, before the cloud, you had to run your VMs and virtualized operating system somewhere. That was vSphere, or today's environment would have something like Red Hat OpenShift or something like that, or you'd be using the cloud. So I saw
Yeah.
the similarities and I jumped in and realized, you know what? this is a path I could take. And the rest of the technology side is like it's ongoing. You're always going to learn more about Kubernetes as you go along because they're still enhancing it. But the
Yeah.
community side is interesting because once you expose yourself to that ecosystem, and once you decide, okay, I'm going to attend my very first KubeCon, which happened in not the very first KubeCon, but my very first KubeCon was in San Diego back in 2019. I saw like a vibrant community out there of these grassroots engineers that were building something in open source because Kubernetes is open source. And you start to see like, okay, you see all of these different individuals that are contributing, that are writing code, but they're also evangelizing what this technology stack is. And I realized like I wanted to be a part of this. So, I spent more time in that ecosystem by trying to contribute to open source. I pretty much failed at it because it requires like a good amount of consistency, and I had no idea how PRs and GitHub and all that stuff worked back then. But I started to begin to understand like this is how the community interacts with each other and how you start contributing back into that open source space. And then you fast forward to my first developer advocate role. I realized like, okay, maybe it's time to really be a true part of this community. So I started participating in our local cloud native Toronto meetups and attending them and speaking at them to a point where I decided, okay, how can I become a co-organizer? And the team was happy to bring me on board. And ever since like maybe 2023, I've just been a part of that team and helping with meetups and whatnot. To the point that we hosted a number of them in 2024, 2025. Had a few, actually had one earlier this year. We're having our next one on Thursday. But as a result of all of that, we actually started to do, we actually built out a conference, KCD Toronto, which just happened literally like a month ago, I think. Wow, it's been a month ago. But community is just more than like going to meetups and, speaking at them or participating. It's actually finding other opportunities to connect with the community. And Twitter happened to be, or X, whatever you want to call it, happened to be the place where the conversations were happening around this ecosystem. So probably around the 2021 mark was when I started doing like Twitter spaces where I would talk about like various technical topics. And once you start doing more and more of them, people find you and people connect with you, and then you start communicating and chatting with them and start forming ideas and collaborating, and it just becomes a snowball effect of community. So here we are in 2026, and I finally get to be on your show, and that's because of community, right? So.
Yeah, totally. Like, I'm trying to remember where I first met you, or it was probably online, but I don't remember how we connected aside from probably some mutual. But yeah, you're always super kind and cool and chill. And I was like, it's the kind of people I want to hang out with, and I've actually, even though I know you say I'm not so new to the Kubernetes ecosystem still, but I still feel like I am. But everybody I've met in the ecosystem in person has been super cool. Like I went to my first KubeCon in London in 2025. It's kind of like baptism by fire. I just started the new role and ended up there, barely knowing anything. But
I think that's where we first met, actually, if I'm not
oh
mistaken.
yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're 100%. So yeah, you popped by the booth and we're like, hey, we're finally gonna meet. So yeah, we took a selfie and then chatted a bit. Yeah, so I met you. I got a chance to chat with Hazel Weekly. She was super cool. I got to meet Ian. Their last name is escaping me at the moment. No, she's on. They're on the security.
Coldwater.
Yeah, Coldwater. Sorry, thank you. Yeah, I got to meet Ian. Super cool. Didn't get to chat long, but and just bumped into other people. And like I've been to like 3 KubeCons now, and it's a little different when you're working the booth because you obviously can't wander around all day. But still got to meet some people, and I think the coolest thing for me so far has been I attended my first KCD, which was the KCD Toronto that you co-organized. Uh, One, it was super well organized and just a lot of fun. And there was like some people I already knew, and then I was meeting other people. And yeah, it was just really well done, and like I found it super welcoming. And then the funniest thing was I went to Europe for a couple weeks for conferences, and I spoke at one, and I ended up at the KCD in Prague, like I was mentioning you offline, and they're like, "Who's first KCD? What is it?" And I was like, I wanted to say yes, but I was like, no, I was literally at my first last week, so I kind of got back to back ones,
Yeah.
but even there, met a lot of cool people, some connections, and just in general, like at conferences, people always say it, but it really is true. Like, obviously, there's excellent talks, and you can definitely catch those. Most of the conferences, though, they are recorded. You obviously try to catch some talks, but I don't know about yourself, but the first conference I went to was Remix Conf when I was working at Netlify, and I literally tried to watch every talk. It was a single track, and I was cooked by lunchtime. So then I kind of slowly realized you just can't do that. So you go to what you can, and you'll catch the other ones later. But it's the hallway track where you just hanging out with people, whether that's like just at the conf, or maybe you go grab a bite to eat after, or people go out, at the after parties or whatever. And it is super important, and it's fun. Like I love hanging out with people, and so like this is just it's a big unlock, and I don't know, I just love it, hanging with and meeting new people. So
You're absolutely right. Like the conferences themselves are just they're huge and they come in different sizes. You've got the KCDs, which are normally about like 300-ish in size, and then you've got the bigger ones like Remix and KubeCon, and then you've got even the larger ones that are like the Cisco Lives and
yeah,
reinvents, if you will, and ignites. And the interesting thing about it is, you try to go to everything, but there's only so many steps in a day you can take. There's only so many conversations you can have. There's only so many
yeah,
talks you can get to, especially since a lot of them are just spread out throughout like this massive venue. So like you take reInvent, for example. I'm not sure if you're going this year, but if you are, and if it's your first one, you specifically, Nick,
yeah.
just be prepared. Like, you're going to be doing a ton of walking. You're probably going to clear like 30K steps in a day.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because it's like Vegas is so deceiving in terms of you see these like massive casino hotels and you think it's like so close by, but you're
yeah,
like walking 3-4 kilometers before you get to it. Um, so those conferences are great for pacing yourself and just like picking and choosing what you can. But the other side to it too is there's so much content that's pumped out of those conferences that you're never going to be able to get to every single one of those talks, even after the recordings have been released. You can watch as many as you possibly could, but
yeah,
then your brain starts to turn to mush because there's so many competing ideas in your mind around like how you do one thing versus another to achieve the same goal, if you will, or outcome. But yeah,
yeah,
conferences are great. I think the best part about conferences overall are always the hallway tracks. Like you get to find out about people and their walks of life. You get to find out about some of the challenges that they've encountered over the last couple of years, and maybe that's your chance to maybe seek out a new opportunity too. Like I think
hmm,
some of the conferences I've gone to are where I was able to find my next thing or set up the conversation that led me to my next thing. So KubeCon, for example, the one in Atlanta that just happened a year ago, roughly,
yeah,
was a conversation I had with a few people at Isovalent Cisco. I've known those folks for years, like probably 3 years now plus, and that led me to the role that I'm in now, right? And you just never know where some of these places can take you, but it all goes back to community, right? Like what you say, what you do, how much of it you do, how consistent you are. I see you're very consistent with the live streaming. I wish I was the same. I was doing a bunch like last year up until like maybe probably September, and then I stopped because there's a lot of chaos going on at work, and I just
yeah,
like started a new role, and at the same time like still trying to navigate some things at home. and I stopped that, and I had to think like, okay, when am I going to get back in the live stream? And it's like we're already halfway through 2026, and
Yeah.
I still don't know what I'm gonna do. Anyways, I mean, that stuff will always be there when I'm ready to come back to it. But for you, I appreciate that you do this often because you get all these diverse perspectives, either demoing something really cool, solving a particular problem with agents. Now, this whole thing about loops, I have no idea what the hell the loops
Yeah.
thing is about these days. When I look at Twitter, I'm like, loops, loops, loops. This post
Yeah.
about loops, what are they talking about? Are they talking about the Ralph loop now? What? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. Ralph Loop so last 3 months ago.
I know, right? And that's like the most insane thing about AI is like this week will be something really hot and everyone's all over it. And then next week, like no one talks about it and it's something new. This stuff
Mhm.
is just moving at more than breakneck speed at this point that I think for me, I can't keep up. I don't know how others are keeping up, but I just simply can't. So I'll just like peek and see here and there, like, oh, what's new? Okay, great. I'll just go back and put my head back in the sand and continue what I was doing, and then come back out a few months later, and then all of a sudden something new has come out. So
Yeah.
um,
I yeah, it's tough. Like I kind of equate it to like I did a lot of stuff in the JavaScript ecosystem and like I don't know if you remember, but like in the like mid 2010s to 2020, it like the joke was like a JavaScript framework coming out every week. And it was kind of
yeah,
true to some degree.
yeah,
And it was just overwhelming, this fire hose of stuff. And then at one point, I always used to just try to be on top of everything. And then at one point I gave up, not because I didn't care, but I was just like, I'm still gonna headline skim. I'll be, ear to the ground, but I'm only gonna dig into tech X when I actually need to now, because otherwise you just burn out. But the thing I find different with AI is it is changing all the time in that same regard, but it's happening even faster, and the changes are actually relevant. You know what I mean? It's like if I missed a JavaScript framework back in the day, it'd be like, okay, whatever. But now it's like, okay, this new thing in AI, and so like it it's not even FOMO, it's just there's stress about like really trying to keep up because the tech is evolving, and you kind of need to know it, but it's finding that balance like you said. And at the same time I feel like we're in a Twitter bubble because like I just spoke in Romania like a week and a half ago, and only some people knew what MCPs were. They had never heard of, so like me thinking I'm like way behind, and that's this is not a cheap shot at the people I give the talk to. That's not what I mean. It's more like you don't realize how like just some people might even just be at work with Copilot because they got a Office 65 subscription with work. You know what I mean? Like there's so many levels of like where people are at. So I I still think it's good to keep an ear to the ground and try to stay current, but I don't think we're as far behind as we might think we are sometimes, So
yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the European Union in general, they aren't, I wouldn't say they're behind it unintentionally, right? Like they're doing things with intention where they're really taking the time to iron out the details. They're taking the time to investigate, research, make sure if it's viable for what they're trying to build. And that puts them behind by maybe a year or two because when I look at
mm,
the European Union, for example, they're now starting to heavily embrace things like Kubernetes. Whereas, like you look at North America, like Kubernetes was like 2 years ago, basically. The hype has died down. There's a lot of stabilization and maturity in that ecosystem, and there's a heavy emphasis on what's next with AI, and there's always something next with AI, and that's the beautiful thing
yeah.
about it. It constantly evolves. Um, but to your point though, like I think when you think about what you need to address first and foremost, especially in the EU, they're thinking about things like sovereignty and
Mhm.
data residency and data gravity. How do I make sure that I can now have a lot more control over the output of my applications versus storing it up in some public cloud provider and then having to worry about the regulations after the fact. No, they're very regulatory first and then everything else afterwards, right? And that what
Yeah.
keeps them behind a little bit, but it's not a bad thing, right? It's just the pace at which they move. And Canada's kind of the same way too. Like I
Hmm.
think even though we've got like a couple of AI companies, one like Cohere, for example, that we're going to be hosting our next meetup at, they've been around since like I think 2019, maybe a year before that too.
Yeah.
And they effectively have been building out models that Canadians consume, that
Yeah.
Canadians can limit their access to if they wanted to. So there's a lot of nuances around like how advanced things are getting, but then you also have to think about the consumption side of it too, and that's where we're at. Hey, Cadence, nice to see you. Thanks for coming by.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
was a question. There were two questions actually that I'm seeing in the chat.
Yeah, well, we can maybe address Mohammed's first because
Yeah.
you were just speaking about AI, but they're saying with AI at Kubernetes, what implementations can be done? For example, open telemetry, observability, and security.
Yeah, there's a lot of different like areas when it comes to that AI implementation, right? So first and foremost, what's been happening with the cloud native ecosystem is that they're starting to treat agents and MCP servers as prioritized workloads, much like just regular pods. And that
Mhm.
means we have to transform the way we secure them and route to them and whatnot. So you're starting to see things like, I'll give you a good example. You're familiar with Gateway API, right? Like the Ingress stuff and
Yeah,
all of that stuff, right? So in the Gateway API space, there's the inference routing CRs or custom resources that have shown up, which allow you to now like specify models that you want to route to. So let's just say you deployed like 5 private models, and then you've got like one external public model that you're consuming.
yeah,
You can route to those models based off of various conditions. I think Pomerium even does that too, within your own ecosystem, right?
yeah.
I mean, I worked for Kong at some point, and they also did that too. But it's about like making models more available, more consumable, cutting down like costs, adding authentication in the mix, authorization, if you will, allowing agents to consume models, but in a very sustainable manner. And that's
Mhm.
all showing up in Kubernetes. Observability is another key one too. Like for example, with open telemetry, you're there's another concept called open LLMetry or something. It's
Oh,
like
really?
a
I
hard
haven't
time.
heard of that.
Yeah, yeah. It's a new thing that came out in the last several months, but it's
Okay.
focused on LLM observability and how LLMs are interacting with each other or with agents, and understanding things like latency between your agent and your model or your application and your model.
Okay.
And there's been a lot of work being done in the OTel space or open telemetry space to address that specific area too. There's work being done to build MCP servers inside of Kubernetes to make them much more Kubernetes native.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, Kubernetes itself is meant to be an infrastructure as code or real estate provider, but you're not going to have people use Python or like Rust or Go to write or program Kubernetes or deploy your infrastructure. You're using Kubernetes native approaches like Helm, and maybe even tying it to Terraform or something so that you
Mhm.
can deploy whatever you're looking to deploy. But there's a lot of things. I mean, I could name a bunch of projects right now. Yeah, Cadence even brought up open inference as well. So there's a lot of different things going on in that Kubernetes ecosystem, to the point that the Linux Foundation had to sit there and assess, like, are we going to just bring more AI into cloud native, or should we split off and do something different? And so
Yeah.
in Linux Foundation, they created a new foundation called the Agentic and AI Foundation, AAIF.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's one of the prominent figures there is Angie Jones. She's out there doing a lot of work in the AIF space, and now we have conferences around it too, right? Agent Con, MCP Con, some others as well. I forgot all the names. There's just too many conferences at this point.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a realization that while infrastructure and real estate is always going to be important, there also needs to be an open foundation that focuses on how we build with AI, how we expand on it, expand the use cases, expand open source technologies that map to those use cases as well. So it's a good split. But what I'm also noticing is that like there's now less attention on like the cloud native ecosystem and more on AI, right? That's just the
Yeah.
natural course of things.
Yeah, I feel like that's just in general in tech right now. It's like, yeah, check out my cool thing. Oh, look, here's AI though. I, I get it. Like everybody's trying to stuff AI into everything because it just looks good too. Like from a marketing standpoint. Like we're AI first. This is AI powered, and it's like I I get I get why people do that because investors are just going to give you money, but it's like I think from like a user experience, like a person, my mom's not going to care that something's AI powered. What she's going to care about is, okay, I can do my taxes faster now. Okay, under the hood, yes, it is AI powered doing something, but you don't need to say that. You can just say like, I don't know, TurboTax or whatever, now 30 times faster, or get your taxes done in like 5 minutes instead of half an hour. I don't know, but but people just like, and I get it. It's a marketing thing, but it's like I think in a lot of cases you don't need to, and I think I think it turns off a lot of devs too. Like
Yeah.
like yeah, I am somewhat AI pilled, so like, but even with that, like seeing it like everywhere, like jam it in this, jam it in that. I don't think that's necessarily a good look either. So
You're absolutely right. A lot of organizations, even ones that have been around for a long time, have jumped on that train where they're trying to provide a service to AI or add some AI flavor. And, it is the current hype cycle that we are in. And it's just something that
mhm,
you can either go along with it or you can maybe pick and choose certain parts that you can double down in. So for me, like that's why I went back to the infrastructure space and focused more on like the lower level stuff because you can't run AI without an infrastructure.
yeah,
Um, whether you're doing it privately or using the public cloud, guess what? The public cloud providers are still buying up chips, memory, networking gear, servers, storage, or they're doing the bright box, white box approach where they take a box that's non-branded and then they customize it to their liking. But
mhm,
at the end of the day, like the hardware is sitting underneath all of that. And I don't know if any of you are like investors or day traders, but if you look at the stock market recently, it's been propped up by all of these memory and chip companies like
yeah,
Nvidia. They're all hardware companies that have existed for years, for decades. And when I look at that, again, it's all a hype cycle. It's all a cycle where right now software is so easy to develop. That I'm not saying good software is easy to develop. Software is easy to
yeah.
develop, right? Um, but because it's easy to develop, it feels like I'm not a developer, but I can just literally go pull up Claude Opus and then write something and then boom, I've got something. But if everyone can do that, now what's left. But if everyone's doing that, what ends up happening? We have resource scarcity that goes on,
Yeah.
which is why like a lot of the problems we're starting to see now are around like people being against data centers being built out because data centers require cooling, power, a proper HVAC. They require a lot of fresh water, which
Mhm.
isn't easily available anymore. Like it is available, but it's also a scarce resource, and it's going to be even more scarce over the next little while. The more and more we double down on building out these data centers, and that leads you to like, okay, if we can't do this on Earth anymore, then we've got companies that are trying to put data centers in space. Not a
Yeah.
bad thing, but that also presents a whole different set of problems. And the most fascinating part about that problem altogether is the networking part. because you can't solve the latency problem in space like you can on Earth. Like on Earth, you could basically be like, hey, I'm going to take optical fiber cables now and solve this problem easily, or create a central pop and then basically go ahead and peer with that pop. And now my latency is cut down. Um, Cadence brings up a really good point. Going back to infrastructure, when I run models, I get layer by layer OTel spans. I know how many watts my prompts use. Cloud native is always going to matter. You're absolutely right. And that shifts significantly once you get into space. So I don't know what the end game is here, other than billionaires trying to be richer, but becoming trillionaires. But that's it. It's an ongoing game where hardware and infrastructure are going to be the key parts of this entire conversation.
Yeah.
I digress, though.
No. It's a good point, and it's like I remember. I don't know if you know my old coworker John McBride. He did work
Yep.
at VMware.
Yeah.
I worked with him at Open Source before I started working at Pomerium, and when I was looking for my next role, one, I had spoken to Angie Jones, who you mentioned. She's a friend of mine, and because I've been an IC my entire career, but I'd done DevRel tendencies pretty much since 2020. So I spoke to her, and I decided to go into the DevRel space like officially. But for companies, like when I was speaking with John, he's like, talking about Pomerium specifically, he was like, yeah, security infrastructure, that's a good place to be right now. And it's something I never really did in the past. Like I worked at McAfee for a while. I worked on their password browser extension, kind of like 1Password, but that was really more at the application layer. And I've just been finding it super interesting. And yeah, to your point, like all this inference, it needs to be managed somehow. It has to be secured as well. And Mohammed was asking in the chat, guardrails on Kubernetes and stuff. So I I feel like I'm in a good space, even though I still feel slightly out of my wheelhouse because I'm still learning a lot of stuff. But it's been super cool. Like everything is interesting to me right now, which is a great place to be. When your job's boring, that's the worst. so,
Yeah.
so like, and I'm constantly learning stuff right now. But yeah, in regards to security, like Mohammed was saying, like, we're obviously going to need guardrails. Like, speaking specifically in the context of Kubernetes, do you know if there's any native stuff in like anything agentic in Kubernetes right now in terms of guardrails, or is this more like third party just coming in and stuff?
Yeah, the guardrails are definitely third party, right? Like there's Kubernetes as itself is not secure, right? And when you deploy it, it's missing a lot of key guardrails that need to be put in place. And so you have to start doing add-ons. Now there's always going to be enhancement proposals that are coming in to enhance it. But then you also think about the other side of the bloat with Kubernetes. Like, do you want it to become much more bloaty and have all of these features and functions to the point that it becomes hard to move around that environment? And so there's a balance of providing a real estate platform
Hmm.
and effectively adding on or bolting on what you need to get to that level of guardrails. I know Palmarium has guardrails in place for models and agents, and other companies I've worked for have similar technologies as well. But it's always going to be an add-on, right? And it's not going to be
Yeah,
very cookie cutter, if you will. You have to decide like what your use cases are, and then pick and choose the necessary guardrails that fit your model, your environment, your use cases.
yeah,
Ultimately, though, there are some. I mean, there are best practices and blueprints out there that exist that suggest this is a path you should take. But then you shouldn't be sitting there running all open source in production, because that poses another set of problems. When something breaks, you're pretty much at the mercy of open source and going out and opening up issues and harassing the maintainers and contributors to solve that
yeah,
problem, right? And guess what? Those maintainers and contributors, not all of them are getting paid by their day job to go do that. There are some volunteers out there that are giving up their weekends or evenings or spare time to go do this because it's fun for them, but they don't want to be harassed by people that are running the stuff in production.
Yeah, and that's a whole other a whole other discussion. But like, just to kind of latch onto that a bit too, like I know a lot of people have been using AI to generate like CVE reports and stuff. Like in the GitHub Stars channel, Daniel, who's the creator of Curl, he said like I think it's Daniel. He said like we're just not taking these kind of CVE reports anymore. He just shut it down because it's too much noise. Maybe there is some valid ones in there, but like because it's just somebody saying like, go to the curl repo and find me security vulnerabilities, and just send it off. There's no proof of concept or anything. It's literally like kind of AI, lazy AI slop. So that's definitely causing issues too. But yeah, the whole open source thing is a whole other thing. Like I know like Nginx, for example, like it's been retired now. I caught it was a really good podcast episode. I can't remember if it was the Pragmatic Engineer or if it was maybe the Kubernetes podcast, but I think two of the main maintainers of Nginx, they were talking about, they just don't have time. Some of them they're obviously employed, some of them, but even being employed, it's it it's just it was so much work. And it's like it's still wild to think like stuff like TLS or curl is literally like built by one or two people, maintained by one or two people, and it's like the backbone of so many things. It's just wild.
Yeah, one of the maintainers of that Ingress Engine X project, his name is James Strong, and he archived the project live on stage at KubeCon, I think earlier this year. But he comes out and says like the fact that it's just become unsustainable for them altogether from a
Mhm.
time perspective. You're absolutely right. Like people have got day jobs and they've got to prioritize that over their open source contributions. I've known a few of the maintainers there, and they're very busy. I know what they're up to. Cadence
Yeah.
brings up an interesting point, by the way. Betting on map books,
Yeah.
not GPU racks in space. I totally am with you there. There was someone on Twitter that posted about buying a bunch of those Mac Minis. Like they created a whole rack of like Mac Minis and they were clustering them together. And what's
Yeah.
fascinating is I think it was the Thunderbolt 5 specification. In that specification, there was a protocol that was snuck in there. It wasn't really widely talked about, but something called RDMA, Remote Direct Memory Access.
Okay.
And what that does is allows you to basically use remote memory, but the way it happens is over some sort of connection protocol like Ethernet or Thunderbolt, if you will. And
Okay.
the reason for that is because it almost makes you feel like if I'm here and I'm accessing your memory in your system, I should be able to do that with like immense speed. And that
Mhm.
is actually the right way to go in reality. Like you are going to see high performance memory computing because I think it was who is it? It's our friend that now lives in Dallas. He was in Toronto. Rashab.
Oh, yeah,
Rashab
Rashab, yeah.
he put out a post like very recently about how like the importance of memory has like increased so much because it's all about memory. Like everything you do is in memory, not in the VRAM part of it, but actual DRAM. So
Yeah.
we're starting to see, I mean, I've been seeing it for a while, but that whole notion of like GPU clusters is one thing, but Mac clusters,
Yeah.
I'm totally with you. Like if I could, and by the way, if you go look at like Apple's refurb website, you can't find any refurb Mac Mini M4s. They're all gone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's telling you something. Anyways, enough
Yeah,
about
no, for
hardware.
sure. Yeah, well, I'll just drop another link about hardware. Is like
Yeah,
I caught it. I think it was Jensen. They have those new RTX Spark laptops, so like AI
yeah,
chip in there, and they're betting on that. And I definitely think local AI is going to become more feasible. Like right now, it's like okay, like for example, like I have a Kubernetes cluster just so I'm learning stuff. It's got 32 megs of RAM. I got 8 VRAM in there, and I have Olama on it. But like realistically, it runs like Gemma 4, the 2 billion model, and it's responds in an okay amount of time, but it's obviously nothing like if I was in ChatGPT or Claude.
Yeah.
And so like I don't know. I think some of the people praising local models and stuff like on their own machines. It's like I've seen people like either like that huge cluster, like that maybe wasn't just a person at their house, but like some people are like, oh yeah, like DeepSeek's great on my, three $25,000 MacBook Studios, which is not what most people would have, right? It's not, that's just not feasible. But I think having these AI native chips in there, things are just going to get better and stuff. Oh, hey, Ian, how's it going, man? Long time no see, man. But yeah, it's still like, if you have a model that is good enough, I think, and on device makes a lot of sense, like on your phone and stuff. Like, I think long term, the bet I would say is like you're still going to use frontier models and stuff in the cloud, but maybe it's really for that bigger work and like, the normal stuff. Like instead of me asking ChatGPT about like help me organize a trip, maybe that's running on local with like web search tools and stuff. Who knows? But yeah.
Yeah, those small tasks. I mean, I use Claude for that kind of stuff a lot,
Yeah.
surprisingly.
Same.
Just to literally cut out the work of like trying to look up stuff and whatnot. But you're absolutely right. It's impractical to run something with like 7 or 8 billion parameters like locally on your system anymore, because it's not just about the VRAM, it's about the RAM that you have. And when you start consuming it on, like I have a Mac Mini, 24 gigs of RAM, I could probably do a 2 or 3B model, and I'd still have to tune it. But the reality is like the performance, if I'm trying to do some high grade development, if you will, I will definitely use, like you said, a frontier model. That's the right way to go. Now, in the EU, that's a different story because they would rather spend the money and build out clusters because of that residency and sovereignty requirement. So,
Yeah. Which is totally fine, and I'll be honest. I've been using like Kimi K 2.6 right now. It's been really good. Yeah, and Gemma 4, like Ian saying,
KV cache,
it's
I
pretty
like
something.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, like I think you kind of touched on it before, a bit of the security and stuff, and I know we're getting close to time here, but I am kind of curious about like because you're over at Isovalent. You have a project called Cilium. Is Cilium a project or is it a product? Like, is it an open source project with like obviously like a paying component maybe, or like what is the structure of it?
Yes. So Cilium is open source itself, and there's an enterprise edition too. But a lot of end users that I encounter are using Cilium inside of their environments, and it's not because it's just another networking layer. It's because of the way it's structured. And if any of you have ever heard of something called the Berkeley packet filter,
Yeah,
that's effectively something inside of the Linux kernel itself. And an extension of that in some of the more modern like kernels or version of kernels out there is something called eBPF, or Enhanced Berkeley Packet Filter. Now, what happened is that they realized that doing a lot of decision making or policy enforcement in user space actually adds latency. But if they can do this in kernel space, and write hooks for certain kinds of events by using traces and probes, then
yeah,
you can basically effectively police it faster or route it faster or prevent a packet from leaving the host a lot faster and reduce
yeah.
latency ultimately. But it's all based on eBPF. Hey, Roxy, how's it going? It's all based on eBPF. Hey, Ian, by the way, nice to see you after a long time. And quite honestly, eBPF has become a very important pillar, if you will, in not only cloud native, but even other systems too. So if you think
Yeah,
of like along the lines of security, if I'm able to catch something in kernel, for example, in Linux, in the operating system, if I run an ls command, it's going to tell me all the files. But sometimes you don't want to just list out the files, or you don't want to allow permissions for that user to go list out all the files. So you can
Yeah.
block that in eBPF, and that's another open source technology called Tetragon that does that for us too. But it's watching the kernel for events. When an event occurs, it's going to enforce and do some sort of action on it itself.
Yeah.
And that's extending itself into the AI space as well, where models might be writing a bunch of applications either in or out of the kernel, in user space or in kernel space. And something needs to watch it because you might not
Mhm.
have the right tooling in place to catch something that happens at the kernel level. And like,
Yeah.
I appreciate the shout out there, Cadence. Like, yeah, I'm glad I work for Isovalent now after a long time. But yeah, eBPF is so cool. Yeah, Roxy's like, Marino's so serious right now. I know, I'm totally serious. When I get into some of this stuff, like it's like nerd sniping basically, and you just like zoom in and you're just trying to do things with it.
Yeah.
But I'm going to commit your code, or I think I am. I still have to figure out the logistics behind it. But I'm delivering a
We'll
talk.
make it happen. We'll make it
We'll make
happen.
it. We'll make it happen. I'm delivering a talk around like how a developer would perceive how their application performs on the network. And look, a developer's never going to have access to a cloud VPC or have access to network devices. But there are things that they can do, like either in eBPF or outside of it, that they can figure out what's going wrong, or they can think of ways that they can wrap security around it too. But at the end of the day, like eBPF is the key. This
Yeah.
Jason's like handsome Canadian SOB stream isn't bad. I love it.
Yeah. It's styling Maple Mafia, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. To your point about eBPF, like a lot of this stuff is new to me, and I heard about it, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it because like the Linux kernel is inherently very secure. You shouldn't be in there, and and to me, like I know this is probably not the case, but eBPF sounds to me like you're punching a hole in something that's secure, but I don't think that's probably not the right model, right?
Not really. So eBPF itself is a set of like sandbox kernel programs that you're writing. You can write them
Okay.
with C or other languages if you want. But because it's sandboxed, what it actually prevents you from doing is crashing the kernel. So you write a sandbox program, it can interact with the kernel through those hooks and events and whatnot.
Okay.
But it can never actually modify the kernel itself. It just prevents something from occurring or allows something to happen. And that's why it's become so powerful. I mean, a lot of security vendors are using eBPF in some way or shape. Even some of the telemetry providers out there use eBPF for observability because they're trying to understand like latency between pods or applications, if you will. And
Yeah.
that data lives in the kernel because you're seeing calls go from one process to another. If I can catch that in kernel, I can, I can just,
Hey, Will, how's it going?
yeah,
Sorry. So
yells or
okay.
trolls. Anyways, enough
Yeah.
about eBPF. I can talk to y'all to death about it if I had more time, but we're not going to do that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm just finding it interesting because I'm definitely looking to get Cilium set up in my cluster because like,
Mhm.
uh, but yeah, the ePPF. Okay, so okay, I understand it a little better. Like I'm gonna dig into it more, but it almost feels like kind of like for people who have been doing anything agentic, like Claude Code has hooks that prevent you to do stuff. Like it's not exactly the same thing, I know, but like the hook says you can't read .env or whatever. So this is like really more at the systems level hooks, and I guess like you were saying for uh, open telemetry, I guess you can see it, you can read stuff that's going on, and I get so you can kind of like decorate those things to be able to log those things that are happening. Kind of, I guess. Is that
Exactly. I mean,
yeah? Okay.
OpenTelemetry, it was built because there was too much chaos in the observability space where like every vendor was doing their own thing. So they decided to standardize on a single protocol and packaging. And in that protocol space, like you're able to get things like logs, you're able to get things like tracing information for like your requests. So if you're trying to trace two
Yeah.
services and you see high latency, is there an offending service? And there's like one more,
Yeah.
metrics too,
Okay.
like, CPU utilization, memory utilization. So that actually sits in user space.
Okay.
But open telemetry isn't specific to just Kubernetes. It's also something you can do outside of it, where you can bake in the SDK into your application, and your
Okay.
application can start like sending telemetry data to an external system. There's
Okay.
downsides to it and upsides, but that's another
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe obviously not today, but if you're down for it at some point in the future, we could do maybe like an eBPF deep dive. I know
Yeah.
there's, I think I opened up a can of worms in a good way because people are just want answers now. So like, I'm guessing for eBPF with Rust, you could use an SDK like Marino was just saying there, Mohammed. But I don't know.
You can even write sandbox programs with eBPF in Rust if you wanted to. So I would just say
Okay.
go to ebpf.io, and if you want to share that
Yeah,
link,
yeah. Okay.
and you'll start to see like all the cool stuff going on in that space too. And
Cool.
yeah. Anyways,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know we're almost at time here, but is there anything else folks want to ask before we sign off? Or I don't know how, I forgot how you close these things. Do you have like a special close? Do we do a dance or something? Are we singing to
Yeah,
some
yeah, yeah.
Canadian
So like,
song? Like
okay, so this is the part of the stream where we shave our beards. Um,
no.
no, just kidding. No, it's just kind of wrap up, just like, hey, thanks for hanging, and then I speak to you for a bit after. But honestly, I feel like I could talk to you all day, but I'm sure we both have stuff to do. I have a meeting shortly,
Oh
but
yeah.
no, lots of great stuff here. Yeah, I definitely. I'm gonna reach out to you offline as well because I'm gonna mess around with Cilium and dig into eBPF a bit more. But
Hey, if you're down for a Cilium stream, let me know. I'm always game. I love
yeah,
that
yeah, we could
stuff.
do it. I'm traveling a bit in July, but who knows? Like we
Whatever.
probably do like August or September or something.
Yep, whatever works
Yeah,
for you.
cool, cool. Yeah, and yeah, thanks everybody in the chat. Thanks for the raid, Jason and crew, and yeah, Marino, thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it. Always love hanging with you. And everybody else, we'll see you next. I think when's the next stream next week? No, it's on the 23rd. I'm gonna be hanging out with Nena from Kodo on June 23rd. So check that out. And yeah, thanks everybody. And yeah, Marino, if you don't mind just staying on for 1 sec, everybody
Yeah.
else, we will see you in the next one.
Bye. Take care.